Congratulations, Dr. Shannon. You're almost at the finish line of this marathon. This is the official interview with school committee. It's scheduled for approximately 75 minutes. We will give Dr. Shannon an opportunity to make some opening remarks. And then we have about a dozen, baker's dozen questions prepared. And we'll pass the virtual mic among school committee members. And then with time remaining, I'll open the floor to any school committee members that might have any specific follow-up questions. Then finally, we'll give Dr. Shannon any closing remarks. I will add, for clarification, there have been a number of meetings today, so some of our questions might repeat information or cover similar ground to questions that have been asked earlier today. Dr. Shannon, don't feel like you're repeating yourself at all. This is the one opportunity for all 7 school committee members to hear your answers. So, so no worries if it covers similar ground. This is also the one official public meeting that gets posted, and all members of the community can view even after this evening. So let's see. At the end of Dr. Shannon's closing remarks, we will say thank you to her. And then there is a brief opportunity for school committee members to share any information that we learned during our visit today to colleagues of Dr. Shannon that we spoke to, or any information that was gleaned from reference checks that were done by a member of school committee. We do that in public session to ensure that all 7 members of school committee are operating from the same set of facts and that we're all hearing the same information. And however, this time at the conclusion of tonight's meeting is not intended to be a deliberation on a final selection. Those deliberations and vote will take place next Thursday, March 18th. And that's when deliberations will take place. Tonight's discussion is merely for the purpose of information sharing to make sure we're all on the same page and we're all working from the same set of facts that we've gathered. Alicia, did I forget anything?
Nope, you didn't forget anything, but I will add a thank you to our partners in central office and in leadership, and our staff and our parents and various stakeholder groups who have met with Dr. Shannon today, and to Dr. Shannon for providing us with stakeholder groups to meet with today too. We had a phenomenal conversation with so many people. If I could bring all of them all together into one place in our district, I totally would. I also want to say thank you to CAT, WestfordCAT again, for broadcasting and hosting on their page for us tonight as well.
Thank you, Alicia. And without further ado, I will hand the mic over to Dr. Shannon if you have some opening remarks for us.
Good evening, members of the Westford School Committee. I am really excited to be here. I have to say, a little exhausted. Eric sent me a text and said, don't forget your tea. So, because I was starting to lose my voice. So this is just my lemon water. But I have had a really incredible day. It has been such a joy to meet with so many people as a part of this process. And so I just want to say thank you in advance, and, you know, assure you that regardless of the outcome of the process, I am a member of the Westford community, and I plan to be here to help and lend support and bring my experience to help our students and families. So, hi everyone. I am Michele Shannon Mingo. I am so blessed right now. I have an amazing husband, Eric Barber Mingo. He's the reason that I am now a member of the Westford community. And because of him, I have 3 incredible children, 2 of which have already graduated from Westford Public Schools. And I have my last one in his freshman year. He's gonna make it through by hook or by crook. And I have 2 amazing pups, my black lab, Zoe, and my little Shih Tzu, Gordy. And together we make a little blended family, and we live on Dunstable Road, and our house overlooks Longshore Pond every day. And so the thing that brings me so much joy, and I think I say this every single day to Eric, is like, it's beautiful. Like when I wake up and just look out over the pond, all I see is just beauty, whether it's cold, whether it's warm, the sun, or it's gray. And so just being in Westford has been really transformational, and it's been a gift. I come to you by way of New York City and many other little stops in between. I have been an educator for maybe 33 years now. I have to actually figure out the exact number of years. I've had the great fortune of being an elementary school teacher in the early childhood grades. I've had the opportunity to be a school social worker in several incredible secondary schools in New York City. I was really and truly blessed to be able to actually start my own school called Pathways College Preparatory School. It was a school that was founded in partnership with the College Board to ensure that every single student has access to a college-ready curriculum, and when they leave us, feel like they have choices. So why was that important to me? I said earlier, like, I gave birth to Pathways, right? I gave birth. I didn't have any physical children, but I gave birth to 500 children. And maybe close to, close to 4,000 over my time there. But it was important for Pathways to be about college because of my own experience going to college. And getting to college and realizing that I wasn't actually prepared for college. I've shared this, it's in the article that Divya, the lovely piece that Divya wrote, that I am a college dropout. And I ended up in a situation where I realized that I didn't learn everything that I was supposed to learn. My school didn't offer me the opportunity to take pre-calculus or even trigonometry. And so as I entered Baruch College for the first time and sat in my first college algebra math class, and my professor said, "We're going to review high school math." And I was like, okay. And then he started writing, and I saw those like y over b x z over d to the second power divided by, and I was like, what are you talking about? And sine and cosine, and I was like, what is this? And the students were raising their hands and they were answering the questions, and I was sitting there literally shrinking in my chair, tears running down my face. And honestly, that was kind of the beginning of the end. I flunked out of college at the end of that semester, and spent several years just sort of floundering. And so when I did decide to go back to school, which I worked my way through college, on my own, as a young adult, I decided that I was pursuing education and that no child would ever be in my care and leave their school thinking that they were ready, thinking they were smart, thinking they were gifted even, and realize that they just hadn't been exposed. They hadn't had access and opportunity to learn. That's not going to happen on my watch. And that's what I've spent the last 30 plus years doing. And I hope that maybe I'll get to spend the next, end of my career doing it here in Westford. And so I just want to thank you for making time for me today. And I'm ready to receive your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Shannon.
Wait, can you all please call me Michele? Or is it like some kind of rule you have to call me Dr. Shannon? Okay.
Happy to call you Michele.
Thank
Michele,
you.
the first question I have is, I guess it's a perfect lead from what you were just speaking of. There are many paths to get to superintendent, many districts to work in, variety of paths and options. Why Westford? Why you as a candidate, and why now?
That's a perfect question. Thank you, Avery. So why Westford? Westford is now my home. And I've really spent most of my career giving back to my own community in some shape, form, or fashion. when I had the opportunity to start my school here in New York City, I was actually given a choice. One of the few people who was actually given a choice of where my school would be located. The superintendent in Brooklyn wanted me to come and start my school there, and the superintendent in Queens wanted me to start my school there. And so my connection and my roots were in Queens, in Southeast Queens, and that's where they wanted to put my school. And if I had to make that choice, I'm going to give back to the community that gave to me. And so that's something that's just really important to me. And so while I'm now a member of the Westford community, I have this incredible opportunity. Just by chance, I moved to Westford in September of 2020, and the superintendent position is open. I think I am qualified. I am qualified. And this is a job that I've been wanting to do. I've actually passed up opportunities to be a superintendent. I have actually passed up opportunities to apply. This is the only superintendency that I'm applying for right now, because this is the place where I want to plant roots. And this is the place that I want to see grow further than we are even right now. And so I think that I am well positioned as a person who really has global, like national experience working across systems in education to bring all of that home and help it benefit the students and families here in Westford.
Okay, I have a follow-up. How do you see yourself becoming part of the Westford community? I mean, I know you're living here, but what else, how else do you see yourself getting out into the community?
Well, I mean, before COVID, I was actually scheduled to move here actually right when COVID hit. That's when I was supposed to move here. And then I got stranded in New York and couldn't come home. But I already started doing research because there are just things that I love to do. And so, well, I already go to corrective care chiropractic, and I'm finding my resources in the community. I had been looking into the Westford chorus, right? There's a choir, I think a community choir. I love to sing. Eric is much better at it than I am, but I still love to sing. I can harmonize. I just feel like it's about really now making my life here, right? Being out and about. I'm always in Whole Foods, Market Basket, Home Goods. You'll find me there at any time. And the first thing that I did when I was able to come back was reach out to Principal Antonelli and say, hey, Principal Antonelli, I'm Aaron, Ernie, and Myers' mom. I'm an educator. I'm here. How can I be of service? And so again, regardless of the outcome, my plan is to be of service and support to this community in every possible way, even if it's literally just standing by my husband as he is, on his quest to be a select board member. That will be my role. But I'm here to stay.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome to Westford.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michele. A school district's primary mission should always be about education, right? But for the classroom experience to be successful for our students, Westford schools must also provide a range of services, including human resource supports for approximately 800 employees, regular school bus and special education transportation, school food services, maintenance and cleanliness of our facilities, technology infrastructure, health services, and counseling support. So what in your professional experience qualifies you to lead and manage such a large and varied organization that serves roughly 5,000 students and their families?
So I think that the first thing that qualifies me for this role is my experience being a principal of a school. Although I won't say that I had to manage, 800 employees. I had the responsibility of thinking about every single area of what you just described, transportation, facilities, meals, education and instruction, special education for my small micro example of a school district. And so I start there with understanding that there is a series of systems and structures that surround the system that I have to have fluency around, as well as be able to work with each of my team members who are, hired to lead that work, so that we can collaboratively build out our plan and our strategy for moving Westford forward. But I think the other things that help me be ready for this is the work that I've done in other systems. And so, I've worked, in the talent management, which is equivalent to human resources division in LAUSD. So I'm really familiar with some of the human resource functions at a second largest district in the country level. I have also, thinking about my experience being the chief of schools in Boston, that's really like the deputy superintendent. I was responsible for all of our schools. And while I was not the superintendent making decisions on my own, I was a member of his cabinet and a part of the leadership team that was driving the strategic vision of that district, and sort of thinking through all of those different parts of the puzzle, like how, we attempted to change our school start times and our busing system, right? And so did a lot of work on just thinking about the transportation. I was a part of the team that engaged in trying to turn around low performing schools, and actually had to help lead the closing of a school, which is one of the most painful experiences for any school community. And that really required, in both the closing and the turnaround, engaging people across the entire organization, because we had to not only think about the facilities, we had to think about now new programming, what kind of furniture, what kind of materials, how are we going to staff? I mean, both of my turnaround schools, we, like 50% of the staff was laid off, had to dealing with our labor partners, right? And this is like tension, painful, hard stuff, right? And so I just think that between this sort of range of experiences, and what's interesting is all of those experiences are very urban. And so my learning curve is going to be really understanding and really getting into, what it means to run a small district that is expected to do all the things that the large urbans are doing, but with limited resources. Right. And so how are we going to make sure that we're giving our students everything that they need and want and desire in our small, intimate town, in our place? And so how do I bring some of the big city kind of ideas, but really kind of learn about what it means to run a school in a town with a school committee, not a mayor, and so there's lots of learning that I have to do. I'm going to be honest, I'm not even going to sit here and say that, I know everything that I need to know today to do this job, but I'm committed to learning it. But I think that this piece, and even now in my work in a nonprofit, the beautiful thing is, like, again, I'm a part of trying, we have our budget that I have to help raise the money for. And I get to actually see how districts of all kinds of sizes operate. Working with this really small district in Mineral County, Nevada, just has 3 schools, right? It's the superintendent and his 3 principals. That's like basically the district, right? And so I feel like what I think the gift is that I have a wide range of sort of ways that I've seen schools operate, and I can bring that to help us think about what is our North Star? Where are we trying to go? We're already amazing. Like, we are incredible. Kudos to you, to Superintendent Olson, to the principals and the teachers and the people who have been doing the work you do, they're incredible. And so my job will be to come in and think about, what does schooling look like in the Westford in the post-COVID era, right? Because we're not going to be able to just go back to the way things were. You know, we have to sort of move into a new direction, and that change, whatever it looks like, is going to be hard. It's going to be adaptive. It's going to be difficult, but I think together we can do it.
Thank you.
Hello, Michele. This is Michele. My question is, traditional classroom learning is not for everyone, and the remote and hybrid models during the COVID have forced us to rethink how we approach learning. How will you incorporate those lessons learned and broaden the educational experience of our students to include a range of pedagogical approaches?
So this is my favorite question. Not that, actually, I don't think anyone's really asked it. Maybe one other person asked it. So earlier in my conversation with the teachers, I asked them, they kind of asked me the same thing. And I said, well, let me turn it back to you. What has worked really well this year? And so that's where I want to start, because I'm going to be honest. Again, in my work, we've continued to work with districts throughout this pandemic virtually. And so I have sort of firsthand information around, this district is closing, they have to close their school, this one is shutting down, this one is opening up. And so I have to tell you, this model that you all came up with has been one of the most stable models that I've seen. So I want to also just highlight that, right? So there's some good things happening, and I really would want to learn from the students, the teachers, principals, and the district team, which pieces of this puzzle we need to keep. Like, do we need to keep and have some sort of remote learning academy for the students who are really thriving in this environment right now? I mean, do we need to go to the commissioner to petition, right, for how can we extend our remote learning academy and make it a central part of our school culture? Our town culture. I just think that, I was talking to the teachers about how hard it was to shift to virtual teaching, and had a teacher talk about, she didn't really want to do it. She hated making the videos, but now she realizes how videotaping some of her lessons has freed her up to actually actively engage her students in the learning, the grappling, the productive struggle that our students need. And so I want to capitalize on that in every way. I think that our challenge will be resisting the impulse to go back to normal. Let's just go back to how it was before. That's the thing. That's the challenge we're going to have to hold ourselves to. Because if we go back, we're literally taking steps back, and moving in the opposite direction, I think, that we want to. And so, not that what we were doing before was not, was bad. It's just that now we know what's more even possible with technology. So why wouldn't we want to integrate it?
Good evening, Michele, Alicia. Meaningful and effective equity and inclusion can mean different things to different people. What does it look like to you? And how do you communicate the how and the why to someone who's resistant to those ideas?
So at the Leadership Academy, we have a definition of equity. And it really is my personal definition as well. It says something like, we believe that all students and adults should get what they each need in an environment that was purposely created for them. and that minimizes any kind of marginalization because of race or class or language or sexual orientation or gender expression, but that each person should have what they need. And so what that means to me is that, number one, it is our job to provide students with a personalized, rigorous, and relevant academic experience. Number two, we must attend to the social, emotional, developmental needs of our young people under any conditions. We absolutely have to do that under the post-COVID conditions, right, with the trauma. But in addition, we have to also center our adults, because if we want our teachers to meet the individual needs of our students, we have to meet their needs. We have to make sure they have what they need. They know what they need to know. They have support to provide the services. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion to me is about personalization. It's about cultural responsiveness. It's about making sure that everything we do affirms every single student, that students, no matter who they are, see themselves in the curriculum. They see their history in the curriculum. They see their inventors in the curriculum. They see themselves in the stories that we read. And that students, regardless of their learning ability or disability, are included and welcome and understand that they belong here. And that we teach students about being inclusive, respectful, tolerant of difference, yet committed to our sameness as human beings. And so I believe that when someone comes and feels like, I'm resistant to equity, it's usually anchored in fear of loss of services, loss of power, a fear of loss. And so the way that I communicate, I will talk to them, is like, you have nothing to be afraid of, because we can only get better when we bring ourselves, our uniqueness together. That's what makes us an amazing place. I know I shouldn't bring up politics, but I'm going to. During the election, we have people in our town who voted for both presidents, right? We are a diverse place. This is not a place where everyone thinks the same. And so in order for us to actually continue to grow and thrive, we have to embrace those differences and at the same time build a shared vision for the future. And so to me, cultural responsiveness honors everyone. It doesn't matter, because every single person's culture is honored. And so that is how I would approach the situation. I will talk about the fact that, when we really think about public schools, the first public school was started in Massachusetts. Who was it started for? White males. That's who it was started for. And that same system of education, the one that was started hundreds of years ago, is the same system that we're operating in today, except for our students look different. And so we have a moral imperative to take a stand on this and understand that people are going to be in different places on the continuum. And that's okay. It's our job to meet each person where they are and bring them along at their pace. But our young people, they're going to enter a global society. They're going to work with people who look different than they do, sound different than they do. And we have an obligation to prepare them to engage at that global level.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Michelle. In a high-achieving district like Westford, sometimes our students are afraid to take risks or make mistakes. Modeling healthy risk-taking and being willing to admit our own mistakes is one way to help combat this issue. In that spirit, please tell us about a time that you took a risk professionally and perhaps made a mistake and what you learned from that experience.
So I think on my resume, there's a short period of time at Rhodes Charter High Schools. And so this was after spending time in LA and really missing my mom and my family. I came back to New York to become the equivalent of a chief academic officer for a really small charter organization. We had 2 schools. I was really committed to the mission because it was for overaged, undercredited young people. And we don't really have a lot of students like that in Westford, but those are some of the hardest young people to re-engage in school. And so I thought it was really a good fit. But the organizational culture was really, really toxic. And it was very sort of autocratic. And I took a risk. Like, I attempted to lead differently. The schools were really struggling. We were facing, a charter renewal in a year. And they hired me to come in and kind of tell people what to do so that we would get our charter renewed. But that's not who I am, because I don't believe that you get people to change or grow by just telling them what to do. So I tried something different, and it backfired. I mean, it just really backfired. While the principals and the teachers really appreciated my approach, the organization was under a tremendous amount of pressure to turn, and I wasn't really reading the writing on the wall. And so my approach was just wasn't a fit. And it was to the point where it was so stressful because the CEO would literally write to me pages long email telling me these things. You need to do this, you have to do that, and you have to tell them to do this. And I was just like, no, I'm not willing to do it. And so at the end, we decided it wasn't a fit. And I think the lesson that I needed to learn there is, number one, I needed to assess the culture in the interview process, right? I needed to understand the culture that I was walking into. And part of the reason, even today, this morning, as I was preparing for this marathon of an interview, I said to myself, be yourself. Don't put on a show. Don't put on a performance. Don't pretend. Just be yourself. Because what I want you and the Westford community to do is get to know the real Michele so that you can make a decision of whether I am a fit for you. And then hopefully I will have the opportunity to figure out if you are a fit for me, through this process. But never again will I go into an organization not understanding, or at least doing my due diligence to understand the organizational culture, and also really understanding the charge, right? Because she was charging me with coming in and rapidly turning around the schools. And I was charging myself with coming in and collaboratively co-constructing change. And while we were going in the same direction, we weren't moving at the same pace. And therein lied the conflict. And so I was hurt. It wasn't, I submitted my resignation and they said, yes, please, thank you. And we went our separate ways. But I will always pay attention to the culture that I'm entering and making sure that our values are aligned in the way that we work together.
Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Shannon. Sorry, Michelle. A public school district is only as good as its educational staff, and Westford takes great pride in its educators, from our traditional classroom teachers, our special educators, our integrated arts teachers, our interventionists, our teaching assistants, everyone that has an impact on the educational growth of our students. So can you provide examples of ways in which you have worked to develop, support, and retain high quality educators?
Actually, and this is something that I'm extremely proud of. So as a new principal, because I was starting my school from scratch, my staff was literally growing exponentially every year. So I started my school, it was a 6th through 12th grade school, and we started with a 6th grade and a 9th grade. So we essentially were growing the high school and middle school at the same time. That was a challenge in and of itself. But in year 2, I had to basically double my staff. And so in the interview process, I came across a number of candidates, and I'm thinking of 3 people I'm thinking about 4 people specifically that I brought in and helped. So one of my teachers, she came in and applied for a 6th grade math position. And she came and she was really good. She did a great demo lesson, but she didn't quite land the plane in her demo. And so after her demo, she came to my office and I gave her some feedback. And I just gave her, I love this. I really like that. I saw you trying to do this. However, here are the things that I think would have helped you and help the students master your content. And she said, oh, okay. I said, okay. And so something about the conversation led me to say, do you want to do the demo lesson over? I said, would you be willing to come back tomorrow and do this lesson again with the same group of students? And she said, yes. That was my first nugget, right? Which was this is a growth-oriented person. And so she came back the next day, executed every single thing that I had asked her to try. And I hired her. She is one of brand new teacher, developed her into a master math teacher. Story number 2, my former union rep came to me, seasoned educator, 25 years of experience in special education. And she was also the union rep for her school. Her principal, they had gotten to some conflict and her principal gave her an unsatisfactory rating. Now, normally, it's just principal hiring 101. Don't hire someone who has an unsatisfactory rating. They kind of teach you this in school. But I asked her, I said, well, why did you get an unsatisfactory? And she told me the story. And so I said, okay, I'm going to call your principal. And I'm going to talk to your principal and see what she says. The principal told me exactly what the teacher told me. And despite the fact that there was an unsatisfactory rating, I brought her in, not only to completely overhaul my special education program, which she did, but she became my teachers union representative. And under her leadership, we never had a grievance. Not because there weren't conflicts, but because of the partnership that I cultivated with this educator. Additionally, I moved her practice and helped her to we really reimagine how we could create collaborative team teaching on a budget that didn't afford that. My third example is now an assistant principal. He came to me with an unsatisfactory rating. He did an amazing demo lesson. And over the course of the 5 years that we worked together, by the time I finished, he was on the path to be an assistant principal, and he is an extremely assistant principal right now. My point is that part of, I think, the like secret sauce is the combination of my passion for education, my instructional knowledge, and my focus on coaching and development. It is that combination of things that I like understand and know good teaching. I'm willing to work with you. I've literally told teachers, this lesson that I just saw today, if I rate you today, it would get an unsatisfactory. And I'm not willing to give you an unsatisfactory. So let's work on this and let's do this again. And so for me, the teachers are like, we can't do our work without them. And so our focus is really on developing teachers. And then someone brought up my Datawise experience in one of the other interviews. But for me, like Datawise is a pathway, not that I'm even suggesting that we bring it to Westford, but if we did, like we create systems where teachers are driving their own learning. They're analyzing their data. They're less engaged in lesson study. They're observing themselves, creating peer coaching programs. It's driven by teachers for teachers. And so for me, it's about creating the conditions for teachers to thrive. And it absolutely requires safety, because if we want teachers to open up their practice and we want teachers to take risks and try new things, we have to give them the space to do that, knowing that I'm not standing in the background waiting to get you. I want to catch you doing something good. And for literally the first few months of my principalship every year, I only give positive, affirming feedback. Let me show you what you're doing that I love. Keep doing that. Versus telling you the list of however many things you could have done differently. When someone sees you and sees you trying and sees the things you're doing well, it motivates people to want to do even better. And so that's been my experience. I don't know, I hope it works here in Westford. I think it will.
I just would like to do a brief follow-up for those of us. I've heard that program you mentioned, Datawise. But for those of us who aren't familiar with that, what does that embody? What does that encompass?
So Datawise is basically a continuous improvement process. It was created at Harvard in partnership with principals and teachers in Boston Public Schools. And it was during the beginning of No Child Left Behind when, suddenly we had like tons and tons of data telling us all the things that, were going on with every single child. But teachers were overwhelmed. They didn't really know what to do with the data. And often the data that they had was the state's, assessment data. But it's hard to use that in real time to understand what students are struggling with. And so Kathy Baudet and Liz City worked with a team to create this improvement process. It's an 8-step process. It involves creating teacher teams that are focused on a common, student-centered problem. Usually it happens in grade level teams at elementary level and in content teams kind of in the secondary level. But it's really about creating a space for teachers to study their own practice and use their own data, student work, exit tickets, their, projects and assignments and performance tasks to really study what's working about the way we're teaching. understand it because we've observed it ourselves and come up with their own plan. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the visible learning research that has come out that talks about like what are the highest strategies that really have the greatest impact on student learning and achievement. Teacher collective efficacy, teachers working together in teams, looking at their practice, studying their work has the greatest impact on accelerating student learning. And that's what Datawise does.
Thank you for that additional explanation. I appreciate it.
Hi, Michelle.
I knew it was going to be you, Chris, next.
I think I'm the last one to go, maybe. So the process of elimination, it's me. So I was hoping that you, looking back, could provide an example of a time when you made a decision that proved to be unpopular, but that you felt was in the best interest of students. And so if you can think of a time and tell us a little bit about what happened, how you responded, and then what the end result was.
I think I'm going to go back to the principalship for this because I think that's where I can have, because I could use the Matter Hunt example, but I'll probably, I'll focus on pathways. So let me think about this really quickly. I'm thinking about one of the things we did at Pathways, because we're a college preparatory school, was we believe that students should be exposed to college experiences from 6th grade on. So one of the things we did multiple times a year was to take students on college tours. And so I'm trying to locate it exactly in our mind, but I remember taking a group of students on a college trip. And I mean, I don't know how you all take students on planes to Disney, which blows me away, but because I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever taken a group of students on a plane. But anyway, so we took students on a bus trip to visit some colleges, and we had strict rules around the sleeping, and there was a girls' floor and a boys' floor, and we literally taped the doors. So we slept in the hallway. I'm not sure if anyone has done this. I had a chair in the hallway. And no one was getting out of their room. But of course, with all those things, the minute I went to bed, they come out their rooms, had some kind of shenanigans and party. And I had to make the decision to send some students home. And the parents were really, really angry. Because you're ending my child's experience. I was like, no, your child ended their experience because they left their room in the middle of the night after I told them not to. But I stuck to my grounds because I think this was our very first trip, but I felt like it was important to send the message. If your parents are going to trust me to take you out of state, I need you to meet the expectations. And so we had to just send a really strong message about that. And there was a lot of pushback. Parents wanted their money back, which they did not actually end up getting during that event. But it set the tone, and it helped everyone understand, we want to expose your students to as many things as possible. But we also have to ensure their safety. That's my number one, I'm responsible for your life. And so it was unpopular, and, I was a little skittish, and we didn't take another trip for a year, and we needed, new protocols and strategies. But eventually the families came around because they understood that I was making the choice that was best for all of the students. Because if I can't secure you, one child or two, how can I secure 50?
Excellent, thank you.
Hello again, Michelle. I get the next one, and it's a toughie, so buckle up.
Wait, let me write it down.
What is a book or movie that you've recently seen and enjoyed?
Oh. Oh Lord. Okay, a book or a movie that I recently seen or enjoyed. So it's been sad. I've just been really sad because we haven't been able to go to the movies. Well, the thing that I really enjoyed most, and it wasn't a book or a movie, was the televised version of the original cast of Hamilton. Oh my God. First of all, Eric is obsessed with this. He knows every word to every song. And I almost know every word as well. But I loved it because it was an incredible interpretation of what history could have been. Like, it was like the history, but imagine what it could have been if it actually was inclusive of people of different skin colors. And it was done in a way that I think really honored the life of Alexander Hamilton, but was culturally relevant and responsive to today. And so between the music and the dancing and just like the diversity of the cast, I was like blown away. But I'm also binge watching Star Trek Discovery right now, if anyone is interested.
Thank you very much.
Michele, Westford is a high-achieving district that also values social-emotional balance for our students. Can you provide some examples of ways that you sought to balance high academic achievement for students with their physical, social, and emotional well-being?
So Pathways was designed based on my experiences that I had in at my first job at the Children's Storefront School, which was like this really small, intimate, very supportive, kind of trauma-informed place. Then I worked at Central Park East Secondary, which was a teacher-run school. It was on graduation by portfolio. And then I had also done some work for the Children's Aid Society, Dr. Michael Carrera's pregnancy prevention program, which the theory behind it was really creating an enriched out-of-school time experience for young people focused on the arts, individual lifetime sports, academic enrichment, career and job readiness. And mental health and wellness. And so when I created Pathways, it had pieces of all of those programs. I came with both my educator lens and my social work lens. And I grew up as a dancer. And so I tried to bring those worlds together. And so we had a really rigorous college preparatory curriculum. Our school was a college board school. So every single student had to take at least 2 advanced placement classes to graduate. And so really pushed the academic rigor. We had a really strong advisory program so that students had their home base. And so that they felt like they were known well by at least one adult and knew that they had an advocate in the building. I had a social worker and a guidance counselor, both full-time, providing mental health services, direct services. We also then partnered with a university so that we can have social work interns come in to provide additional clinical services for families. And then I worked in partnership with an organization called Sports and Arts in Schools, and had an incredible young woman come and design a fully integrated arts-based academic enrichment program for after school. And so I tried to take the pieces from all of the different places that I had been and bring it together to create a school essentially like a community schools model. And so my hope would be to sort of leverage a similar approach in my thinking about Westford. We are high achieving, and with high achievement comes a tremendous amount of stress on students at times. And so we definitely need to balance that out. I think we have incredible enrichment opportunities and just extracurricular opportunities for young people. How can we expand that? I'm really interested in also thinking about, dual language, right? We as our young people go out, having fluency in a second language is like adds so much value to your career opportunities. So for me, it is about balance, and wellness and using restorative practices, in terms of how dealing with school discipline. How do we create an environment where a student is able to, have a mediation and have a conversation and then make amends, right, for the harm that they've caused to the community. And so for me, it's all of the hats that and experiences that I have forces me to take this sort of holistic approach, to the way I work.
Thank you.
I'm also, just as a sidebar, ready to start rewatching Game of Thrones, just in case anyone's interested in getting on board with that. Sorry. I was just coming back to your question, Gloria.
Still waiting for that next book.
Sorry, Avery.
No problem. I'm going to ask a budget question for you. So our budgets are like our morals. We place value on items in the budget. What is the process you have used to gain feedback from your staff in formulating a budget that reflects the values of a district or a school?
So for me, the budgeting process that we used at Pathways was really inclusive. So we had, just statutory, we had to have our school leadership team, which is made up of teachers and parents and students and, and my team. And so we would come together every year and look at our school improvement plan, first and foremost, to sort of assess where we are. What did we say we were going to accomplish? What are we hoping to accomplish in the upcoming year based on what we've done so far? And we would start to think about like our priorities. Once the sort of core team sort of generated some ideas around the priorities, it's our job to then go back and socialize those ideas with other members of the community. And so just literally having town hall meetings for parents to come, ask questions about the budget. What are some of the things that you're hoping that we can add to the program? What are some things that aren't working the way, we want them? Same with teachers. Like I always would then go to my teachers. What do you need? What do we want? What new programs do we want to try that are going to add to what we can offer our students, and of course involving students, right? Because this is their school. And so for me, it's a series of conversations as well as a series of presentations, right? Because it's our job collectively to, come up with at least, I believe, like, it's the preliminary budget. I see that as the straw man, right? You're putting a straw man out into the world. Here's a set of ideas. This is what's driving, my key priorities. And now together, let's engage in vigorous debate about which things we really can afford to really prioritize right now, right? So the budget process is for me always a sharpening process of really fine tuning and getting to what are the most important things that we need to provide for our students. And then in order to provide for our students, what are the things we need to provide for the adults so that they can deliver those services to the students? And then what else do we need? How are we going to make sure we're maintaining all of the infrastructure, that we have? And so going through the process of, starting with a core group, but then really expanding the audience and getting as much feedback as we can, and using that data to then hone in on the priorities, and letting our core values and our priorities and our goals drive the way we shape the budget.
All right, I have a follow-up, like I did the first time too. How do you then communicate any budget challenges to the community at large while also conveying the district impact to students and staff?
So I think the question you're asking, I just want to unpack the question a little bit, right?
Mhm.
So there's a budget challenge, meaning that we probably have to think about cutting something
Mhm.
in which people are going to feel a sense of loss.
Yes.
And so how do we communicate the potential loss while reassuring our families and the community that we are still providing the absolute best state-of-the-art education to their children?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was fully.
You unpacked that well.
Okay. So honestly, for me, it starts with transparency. And I think that when we're facing a cut of, when someone comes and says, you're going to have to cut, whatever, $200,000 or $500,000 from your budget, I think the question is like, well, from where? Like, am I being told it has to be cut from this specific area? Or do we have flexibility to be creative in terms of how we think about this deficit that we have to address? And so again, I would want to come to the community itself and put the problem on the table, right, for input. Because if I have the choice, if we have flexibility, then I need to have more voices at the table to help us figure out where should we even consider cutting. There'll be non-negotiables, we all will sort of have our bottom line of like, I'm not willing to cut back on, I'm not going to name the things I'm not willing to cut back on because I know somebody's going to hold this against me later. And so I'm just not going to fall into that trap, but there will be a list of non-negotiables, right? And so that we've come to agreement on. When I say we, I mean you all and me, right? And so we won't be dealing with those non-negotiables, but then we'll bring the community in to help us figure out, this is the gap we have to figure out how we're going to address. I need your input. And how can we then leverage external partners, potentially private sources, to help counter some of that dance that we're going to have to do around the budget? And I'm a big believer in trying to leverage, a place where we're trying to be innovative, where we can get some philanthropy dollars to kind of help us sort of keep a program going, you know what I mean, or start something new. And so that's really the process that I would engage in. I would come to you. And when I say you, I mean the big you. And name the challenge.
Well, thank you.
You can hold me to that part.
All right.
Just
You were
not the
very
non.
smart to duck the other.
Caught myself.
Yes.
Great. Michele, so bad news, no school district is perfect, Westford included. Just want to get that out there. And so in that vein, when negative behavior or discipline issues arise, whether they be among students, staff, the community has to respond in a manner that's effective and sustainable and culturally sensitive. Can you talk a little bit about and provide examples of how you've built cultures of trust and responsiveness that react to conflict and behavior issues?
I mean, I alluded to it a couple of questions ago in talking about the restorative practices. And so when I was a principal, I wasn't quite at restorative justice. I hadn't sort of come into that space yet. But one of the things that we did do was become a part of the positive behavior and intervention support system that was happening at the time. And the reason that I really love PBIS as like a structure for potentially dealing with discipline, or just when people are not living up to the expectations behaviorally, is because it's another sort of tiered intervention program, right? So number one, it believes that you have to explicitly teach students the expectations instead of what I think typically happens in most places. I'm not saying Westford, but that we sort of just assume that students know what's expected of them. And that by the time they get to us outside of sort of kindergarten, because, kindergarten is where we sort of teach you how to behave in school. After that, you're supposed to sort of know how to, get along. And so, but the PBIS system actually forces the adults to be really clear and specific about the expectations. And then it also forces the adults to teach them to students in a really productive, like proactive way. It also forces you to articulate sort of your, what's the right way, term to use, sort of your progressive discipline. Right. And so that students are really, really clear about the ways in which there are going to be interventions. So for me personally, I'm all about restorative. So it means like bringing students together, having circles, talking about what's happening, mediating conflicts as much as possible. Doesn't mean that there won't be consequences, right? Because sometimes we have to have consequences. But what I want to do is make sure that the student who caused harm, or even the adult who may have caused harm, has an opportunity to take responsibility for the harm that they caused in a way that is like healthy and therapeutic, and also finds a way to give back to the community in some way. And so for me, it's really like, especially if we're working with young people, it's our job to help them to develop their behavioral norms, and how they engage with one another in ways that are respectful and inclusive and that affirms everyone, and so teaching students about why don't we tolerate bullying? Right? Teaching students about, how we can protect ourselves when we're engaging in social media. These are things that we have to actually teach them explicitly. And provide them with constant support and coaching and, pushing and counseling to help them get to where they want to be. My hope is that I don't think we really have a lot of suspensions. I actually looked on the state portal and I didn't really see a lot of incidents. And so curious, just to sort of see how the behaviors manifest, and thinking about some holistic, like cell-based strategies for dealing with it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Michele, it's me again.
Hi again.
As the Chief Executive Officer of the district, how do you keep your committee informed? In particular, what's your strategy around issues that are your responsibility, but where the school committee may have an interest?
Well, number one, one of my first tasks is to really cultivate relationships with each of you, right? Like we have to know each other, and we have to have some structures for how we're going to communicate with one another. But I don't want you to ever be surprised. And so I'm sure that I will have Gloria's number on my favorites list on my phone, so that when things come up, I can call her, because we have to work. We're a partnership. You know what I mean? And while it's my responsibility to handle the things on the ground, you are overseeing the entire entity, and it is my obligation to keep you in the loop. And so depending on the issue and what we agree to. Right? Because I think one of the things I would love to do if I end up getting the job is trying to arrange for us to have a school committee retreat so that we can actually come together and develop some norms for how we are going to work together and a set of agreements for how we want to work together and actually start some of the visioning for the work that will happen in the future. I just think it's really important that we have open communication, and that's what I will hope that you would also, want from me and expect from me.
How do you view the superintendent's role with the town administration, given that Westford consistently ranks high in academic performance, but has a budget that spends significantly less per pupil than comparable districts?
So I promised Jody earlier that she's also going to be on my favorites list. But I think that, we have to realize that the town has multiple services that it's trying to provide for all of us, right? We have to ensure that we have our policing system, our fire safety, our sanitation, like all of the systems that the town is responsible for. And schooling is a primary responsibility of the district and takes a significant portion of the town's resources. And so this is something that we will again have to engage in that collaborative conversation to really figure out, again, where are the priorities, right? And so, and making the trade-offs and hard choices around the things that we need the most. What are the things I need now for this upcoming year, post this pandemic? And that feels funny saying post the pandemic, but I'm hopeful, right? What we're going to need for the next couple years to really rebound from this pandemic, I think is going to be a challenge. And working together to try to figure out how to maximize the resources so that, of all of the entities, I think in the town, the school system has been greatly impacted by the pandemic. Right? Our students have been greatly impacted by the pandemic. And so I'm hoping that the town will really prioritize the needs of our schools moving forward as we try to really recover some of the learning loss that have occurred over this last year.
Thank you very much, Michele, for all of that information. I'm sure that if I opened the floor to follow-up questions, we would have several, but we are also trying to maintain some equity and fairness between our candidates and use a similar amount of time between our candidates. So our time has expired for our discussion, but I'm so glad that we got to cover so many topics within our set list of questions. So at this point, I'll turn the floor back over to you, Michele, if you have any closing statement or closing thoughts to leave us with this evening.
I think that, first of all, I just want to take a moment to thank my husband and my children for supporting me as I, apply for this role. It's not easy being the superintendent's kid. I had to have a talk with Aaron to just check on him, but I'm really excited about this possibility. And as I said at the beginning, regardless of the outcome, I am committed to Westford Public Schools. And so in whatever way I can be helpful, that's, what I hope to do. In the event that you choose me, I look forward to a really long collaboration with you, Gloria, and for the rest of the school committee, and hopefully being able to really take this really great district and help it become even greater. through the lens of being equitable, diversity, and inclusive, and bringing cultural responsiveness into our classrooms, our hallways, our cafeterias, in the gym, outside, and on the bus, everywhere that our students go. And I really, really look forward to hearing from you next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So at this point, Michele, we're going to remove you from the panel. No offense, just part of the process. But this is still a public meeting, and you're welcome to stay with us if you would like. And we're just going to give the committee an opportunity to share information that they may have learned in talking to some of your colleagues today, or information that I learned, because that was my role, to speak to people that you have provided to us as references. So you're welcome to stay with us. We're just going to remove your photo off the screen for the moment. All right, but
I'm going to actually say good night and thank you.
All
you
right.
can talk about me behind my back now. Have a good night.
It's still a public meeting, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you for running the marathon today and hanging with us till the end. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Good
night.
Be well.
Good night.
So do we want to start with site visit information, or should I start with reference check information?
I think we started with site visit last night, so maybe for consistency, we'll start there.
Okay, great. Who wants to launch in? I've got a summary of my reference check stuff, but who was able to be at a lot of them?
I was at a lot. I'll kick off with a few of the highlights that I heard.
Great.
Very positive comments from the various colleagues that we spoke to today. I think it was her direct supervisor, the executive director at the Learning Academy, which said that, you know, the three things that she highlighted were trust, which, as she pointed out, is what we're looking for in leaders, the ability to engender trust, a willingness to always roll up her sleeves and do what was needed, and just her transparent, authentic, and honest demeanor, nature, and approach to how she leads. So those stood out for me. I don't remember who it was. Said it was one of the that she was one of the most talented education people they had ever met. And just the last two quotes that came later in the day that I wanted to highlight, where I could not imagine a stronger candidate for superintendent, an incredible human. You will have no regrets if you hire her, and your district would become nationally known for measuring student success in all kinds of innovative ways.
Any other points? I saw a couple of hands. Ming Chen.
Yeah, so I was actually with her direct supervisor. One is the board member, the other is the CEO. So they mentioned a lot of things. Chris said, build relationship, roll up sleeves and get things done, build trust, humility, and that's one of the things which I picked up. Human-centric and diverse thinker. That's the things which also jump out.
Do you see other hands? Valerie?
Yeah, I really latched on to a lot of what we learned in the site visits about her current position, because that organization is unfamiliar to me, and kind of that the services they offer. So I thought that the quotes that stuck with me really kind of illuminated what her current position is. So, and just for the public that's listening, or for anyone that missed it, they described it kind of as being like at the balcony and seeing so many districts and being deep in districts, and can see what has worked in other districts across the whole country, small districts, big districts, and be able to scale that up or down and apply it to Westford. She brings best practices that are seen in other districts and would be able to apply it to Westford. She has a keen understanding of what exceptional teaching and learning should look like, has seen it herself as a teacher and a principal, can talk about it and make it happen in a coherent way and move an initiative forward so that everyone is on the same page. It's hard, this was one of my favorite quotes, it's hard not to get excited about something that Dr. Shannon is excited about. She was described as a truth teller. She doesn't run from controversy. She even did it tonight. Somebody gave an example of like, can we pause for a second? Can we unpack what was just said? And we saw that tonight. And then this quote was, everybody wants to work with her. Everybody wants to be on her team, not because she's easy, but because people grow because of her feedback.
Alicia?
I would say, like going through my notes again, I was circling similar themes, and flexible, innovative, strategic, feedback. These are words that were repeated over and over again. But something that really struck me was a quote from someone she worked with in Boston Public Schools, where she was the chief of schools. And she said she spoke to someone, the stakeholder we were talking to was a 2-level down report to Dr. Shannon. And Dr. Shannon approached her and said, can I reach out to you to learn more? So she sort of went, knowing that she needed to fill in a knowledge gap, she reached down into the ranks and asked someone if they could help bring her up to speed. And I think we heard a lot of that, a lot of building relationships and capitalizing on the skill sets of others, and creating sort of pathways where skills could be shared and information could be shared so that everyone could be on the same page, but so they were also utilizing everyone's best talents in the best possible ways.
Avery?
So I heard a lot of the same of what Alicia and Valerie just said. I heard thoughtful, genuine, authentic, gives feedback and pushes, but in a good way. But I think my favorite, and I wrote it down a couple times, were I believe 2 of her direct reports, who said she is my thought partner. And just the idea of that, I thought, wow, that is a cool way to look at it. And that she has generally curious about things, that she's going to continue to look into things. And as Valerie said, the balcony view struck me that she's really taking a look at all these different districts and trying to help them become the best they can.
Anyone else on site visits? The thing, I had a lot of the same things kind of circled in my notes that has already been mentioned. The last thing kind of at the very end of the day, one of the people we had the opportunity to speak to was one of Dr. Shannon's students from the Pathway School, who is now a young adult, and really described Dr. Shannon as an inspiration, a role model, and a mentor, and just really a lifelong partner. And she ended by saying, "I recommend her without reservation." And it was a wonderful way to end the day on that student voice. I had the opportunity to talk to people kind of across the country because Dr. Shannon's career has led her to different places, from New York to Harvard to Los Angeles and Boston, and circling back to New York. But I really heard similar themes from everyone I talked to, regardless of what time zone they were in. They described her as very energetic, dynamic, joyful, that she's an inspirational leader that not only builds, but also attracts leaders. She builds capacity in others by pushing them to be their best selves, while at the same time supporting them. One reference in particular said, "I very much miss working with her, and would consider moving just to join her again, because it was such a joy to work with her." Another described her process of even becoming an educator because she was inspired by Dr. Shannon. This woman had began as a parent volunteer at the Pathways School, and then that evolved into actually a position where she worked at the school, and then under Dr. Shannon's encouragement, decided to pursue additional education and has now become an administrator and is an assistant principal in a school. And she continues to view Dr. Shannon as a mentor. Everyone spoke about her skills as a communicator, that she's a skilled presenter and trainer. Her written skills, attention to detail, skill with data and data-based decision-making, that she was a very well-rounded, capable leader and lifelong learner. She builds relationships. She doesn't view leadership as hierarchical. She wants to be connected to all stakeholders and maintains connections to those in her past roles, and has really built a national kind of professional network of mutual support. Certainly, she discussed tonight about her views of that she views everything through an equity lens and a very child-centered lens. She does not shy away from controversy or hard conversations. She wants to hear all voices, is an active listener, and seeks to understand issues and engage all voices to address problems. I had some specific questions for people she'd worked with in the past. Since she's currently in a consulting role, I asked some question about things like experience with budget and operations. And certainly people talked about her experience of founding the school in New York City. One colleague described the process of founding a new school in New York as really a grueling process with significant challenges from the development plan to an implementation, the logistics, funding, budget, operation, logistics, and then creating that school and making it sustainable. A number of people described the Pathways community as a family, and that she built that school culture from the ground up. One person addressed that the community at first was skeptical about the need for a new school and what was this new school going to be like, and that she's really created and built that school from scratch and has turned it into a successful and sustainable school. She certainly worked, as we've discussed, in multiple communities across the country. In her consulting work, she's worked with large districts, small districts, urban, suburban, and rural communities. Because it was a unique path, I asked a couple of people that I spoke to directly. I said, how does that pathway translate to Westford? And they really echoed the same thing that Dr. Shannon said tonight, is that by bringing that kind of breadth of knowledge to a single district that is her home community, they felt like she was looking to see the impact on a community in a more direct way that isn't always possible in some of those large districts with those huge districts that she has worked in, that this would be a different style and a different sense of satisfaction to be able to see that direct impact. So that was really the summary of the reference checks and the people I talked to, which was enjoyable. Any other details we might have missed or need to share with one another, or are we ready for a motion to adjourn? I guess prior to that, I will just clarify our schedule next week. On Monday, we have our regular school committee meeting with regular school committee business. On Tuesday night, we will have our third candidate, Dr. Christopher Chu. On Wednesday night, we will have our fourth candidate, Dr. Matthew Jenger. And I think I got those in the right order. And on Thursday night, Thursday night, March 18th, we will be meeting for a final deliberation and vote. So thank you very much to everyone who joined us this evening. And please, if you registered via Zoom, look for that email that will send you the link to the SurveyMonkey. We very much would love to hear community feedback on all 4 of these candidates. And with that, now we're ready for the motion to adjourn.
Motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Second.
And all in favor, Avery,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Ming Chen,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Valerie.
Aye.
Aye. It's been a long week, but a very successful one. Thanks,
Great.
everybody. Have a good
Great.
weekend.
Bye.
Good.
Great week, everyone.
Good weekend.